I think I can make myself noticed and start, first of all, by thanking you all to have come tonight for this artist talk, in which Kalliopi Lemos, the artist of the works that you see around us and downstairs, is well. Sorry, I'm thinking in another language, and we'll get to the fact that we're just talking about languages and barriers between languages. But anyways, so Kalliopi is joining us tonight, as well as Jim Fitzgerald, Jungian psychoanalyst, in this talk, which we titled "Rule and Disruptive Power of Desire," which is. It's a title which generated through a discussion or multiple discussions that we had with Kalliopi in the process and after this show was put up. And I will get to the title in the course of me trying to explain how we got to the show itself, because I think we need a little bit of introduction of the whole concept of the show, and then we can get to why we're here talking about rules in particular. The show titled "All Is to Be Dared," quoting verse or a fragment of the Greek poet Sappho's, was thought of us, was imagined by us as an exploration through Kalliopi's work of the feminine, which is a theme that, of course, Kalliopi has been working on over many years. And I think we will get to talk about also other manifestations of this desire to explore this particular concept and this particular being in the world. And I think in this show, what fascinated me, and I think what brought our collaboration to the results that you see here tonight, is the exploration of the contrasts and contradictions that are imbued in this term, in this idea of the feminine. And I was extremely fascinated by the way that Kalliopi would represent this being feminine, this complexity of femininity, by the representation and by the observation of one particular aspect, which I think emerges in all of the works that we see here, which is that of a very thin membrane between let's say an inner and an outer world, a world of desires, a world of obsessions, a world of quite dark thoughts, as well as we see in the figures downstairs, and a desire for well, not a desire for control, but a desire for structures and a desire for something which can give shape to the inner self, by limiting or maybe by just being able to show the tensions that are inset in this term. And I think what this membrane and what this idea of the membrane, which is represented in the very much so in the figurines downstairs, which are actually shaped by a membrane, which are shaped by a very thin layer of a veil, of a bandage. But at the same time, it's the same idea of the membrane that comes, of course, out of the veils that Kalliopi produced with the actual verses of Sappho's. And just to link all of the works that we see here together, it's the same surface, and I used surface, for example, in text that I wrote for the exhibition. But I think membrane gives a better idea of this, and we discussed it longly also, or extensively yesterday as well, that the wax figures have downstairs, because it's a membrane which can be disrupted as the holes and wounds of the black figures demonstrate. But it is also the same membrane that gives this abstract entity of these deities, the form of a feminine body, of some ideas of the feminine that comes out of these masses, of these black masses. And so focusing on the membrane and focusing on the contrast between an outside world and an inside world made of desire, made out of passion, made out of everything that drives us to something. And this desire is the key word, I think, that we will repeat many times, I think, also tonight.
And the daring.
Yeah, and the daring to break out of this, but we will, yeah. I think in this... This membrane is the object throughout these works that
as the barrier between desire and daring. It's a very thin membrane that holds all together, and it can be penetrated or not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think this. What I was going to say is that I think this membrane is exactly the desire and the pursuit of a personal affirmation through the repression or the satisfaction of desires and of pleasures. It's been a wonderful experience to observe Kalliopi in the making of these works and in the thinking behind all of these. But to share a little bit of the experience that I had by talking to you throughout these months about it, I think I would like to start with a very, very open and simple question, which is this ought is to be dared of the title. What significance do you put to it in relation, in specific to this exhibition and to the works in this exhibition? And I think at the second stage, I would like also to ask how this relates to other experiences in exhibition.
Thank you for coming tonight in our discussion of this project. And to start to talk about this particular exhibition is to give you a moment, an instant when Christian Oxenius came to see my studio in London, and while I was showing him other works, he fixed his eye onto these wax sculptures that you see downstairs, and I was turning his attention to other things, but he was going back to those. My reason for not wanting him to really see them was that they were made, and I needed time to understand them myself. So, but he saw that these were quite expressive pieces, and wanted me to use them. So, here is the first daring to use these works that were yet unknown to me, and they were coming straight out of my unconscious. They were also exhibiting the cracks and the faults that a person experiences in their life. So,
I wondered, could I ask, why did you call them deities?
Yes, I call them earth deities, because I feel that we are all kind of deities. So we have the divine as well as the material in us, all of us. And I call them deities because they hold both these attributes, and wounded as they are, and with those huge cracks and their innards coming out, they are actually talking about how life is. So I thought that Sappho's verses that were written 2,500 years ago were a very powerful suggestion for women of now, because we are now celebrating 100 years of being allowed to vote. We are now starting to speak about being abused and not daring to speak about being abused for so many years. And I thought, here is Sappho, 2,500 years ago, telling us all is to be dared, even without hope. I was just talking to Jean Fitzgerald a minute ago, and telling him she even put even without hope. And she put even without hope because it means exactly the same thing. All is to be dared, even without hope. Even if you have no prospect, there is nothing there to keep you safe. You need to make the jump to satisfy your desire. And here we are discussing this need of the human being, this absolute need of desiring something, a very positive feeling, because this is what moves life forward. At the same time, when we desire something so badly, we can create chaos around us. So I would like to invite Jim to say something about this, because he has...
Don't know where to begin with that. I mean, I think your work just raises so many different ideas for me. Something about the unknown, the unformed, and form, and what does it mean for an artist to start with the unknown, the formless, and to make form. I mean, I think it's a miraculous thing. I'm struck more and more today with I just saw it yesterday for the first time, but more today I think it seems to me to be speaking out of a woman's psyche. I mean, it's so what will I say, moving, I think, for a man to see a woman speaking her form of what life is, and I think a woman is, what will I say, a membrane means more for a woman than for a man. A membrane is part of a woman's being. We think of the maidenhead, the membrane for a virgin. We think of the membrane of the womb. So for a woman, a membrane is about life and taking part in life, I think. And I imagine any woman who's given birth will also realize that the moment for the breaking of the membrane for the new birth. And it seems to me that a lot of this painful birth is what Kalliopi's work is about. She's giving voice to something that is quite far from a man's experience, I think. And I think those dark figures are quite spectacular because they express that secret, I think, of a woman's psyche somehow, in a way that for a man, the male psyche seeks, I think, more for perfection or for clarity or for structure. And to be left with those dark deities, I think, is quite a challenge, really.
Yeah, I think if I can interrupt you briefly there and go back to how you presented our encounter with the black figures, or my encounter through you with the black figures. And I think what you were expressing was that you felt not that they were physically incomplete, but they were incomplete as your own thoughts about them, your own understanding about
recognizing them.
Exactly. And I think in this incompletion, in this imperfection that they have, they hold exactly those elements of a desire that we were thinking about
Right.
now as a fundamental aspect of our human condition, of like desire. If we bring that back to the origin of the world of the word of desiring the star, desire.
Yes.
So looking at the stars but not being able to reach them, I think show this fundamental aspect of our human condition of longing for a completion that cannot be achieved probably, or that we are trying to achieve through the satisfaction of some pleasure of happiness and so on, but it's not the full completion of what we can achieve.
Yes, that links for me with again the deities, because they seem to me to be central. And I wondered if Kalliopi had thought about all of those perfect images of the Greek gods, and unlike anything of this sort,
Yeah.
did you feel that challenge or that contrast with those perfect gods?
I grew up with those perfect gods,
Yeah.
and I tried to fit in with the idea of the contemporary, which is more, let's say, more allowing for the gods to dissolve. So eventually, I dare show these pieces that show the cracks and the gaps in being assembled. So yes, these pieces are coming from my roots, but hence they are deities, but they are daring to show their wounds.
Well, yes, and I would think of it, it's a woman's daring to criticize male power, I think. To certainly criticize the patriarchal perfection and rules, I think.
Yes, well,
Thinking of antiquity, thinking of deities, thinking of let's say ideal figures and so on. Of course, there is a reference, a very strong reference to that also in the figurines.
Yes.
Not just in the way that they're displayed, but also in the gestuality that they have it, in the way that these figurines represent a type of femininity with their gesture. And so I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit more about these. Sorry, are you hearing me also? Until I'm sometimes I forget that we don't have a microphone, so we should speak up a little bit.
of course.
Yes.
No,
we can,
anytime.
At any time you can ask a question. Before you ask it,
Yes.
though, I just need to say something technical. We're recording the conversation, so you just need to raise your hand. We will give you a microphone and you can ask questions at any moment.
At any time,
So-
please.
I wouldn't mind asking a question.
Yes.
Well, Kalliopi, you mentioned the perfection of ancient gods, and I would like to question that. Actually, what is amazing about the period that Kalliopi is looking, and the period before that, which was matriarchy, is that these women, femininity was worshipped to a great degree in the pre-classical past. Sappho and all women before that, there was pure matriarchy like we've never seen before. So the ancient gods, though they were divided exactly between female and male, which is fantastic, and we don't see that anymore with the patriarchy. In ancient Greece, it's amazing that gods were divided between female and male evenly. And not only that, gods had faults, like serious faults. First of all, they were wounded in war. We had gods wounded and blood flowing from their traumas. Also, we had weaknesses, rupture in those perfect gods you spoke about, with all sorts of character faults, jealousy, cuckolding, you name it. So I would like to question whether the ancient gods were perfect. And I think this is why the ancient wisdom we're looking at through the work of Kalliopi is amazing because it has human traits.
Yeah.
And I think trauma and rupture, the way it is represented through Kalliopi sculpture, is very beautiful because it's actually far from idealistic. And actually, I dare say that it may be non-idealistic, but actually it's also ideal in that way. It's just a thought I had in mind when you spoke about perfection, because in antiquity there was really not perfection. And if you think about the ancient order, the ancient orders, they were imperfect. I think all the refinements that we find in temples are faults that make architecture even more beautiful, because it's not absolutely straight. There were bends everywhere, and that is beautiful. That's what I wanted to say.
I think talking about the gods, we can about architecture and the beauty of imperfection. That's definitely something that we can talk later about. In relation to the gods, I think there is a difference between the perfection of the representation of the gods.
Exactly. I was
and
talking,
the perfection of the
about
character.
the outlook of the sculpture, not the faults in the history, not the character.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think in this sense, it actually is quite interesting to see in Kalliopi's work, also in the figurines downstairs, in the reliefs, that this imperfection that was there in the character but was hidden in the representation is actually showing, because also the figurines are not a perfect representation of or an ideal representation of the human body.
There is someone who would like to speak at the back.
Sorry. Hello. It is a sort of related question in that you talk about rules as if it's a masculine thing. I'm a lawyer, I'll disclose, and I do work in a masculine world, but I don't see rules as being masculine necessarily. Rules can be feminine. It's just that it depends what kind of rules are. If you're talking about constraining something by using a particular kind of masculine rule, then that's one thing. But in fact, in expressing the earthly or the more feminine, there are rules of that. I mean, there are rules that come with desires. There are rules that come with everything else. So it isn't a conflicting concept unless you're talking about a particular kind of rule. Yeah. I think it's a slightly related point to the point that was being made. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
So I would like to add regarding the way that these sculptures were discovered. They were in the shadows, the neglected ones, right? And then...
You're talking about the wax sculptures?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So that in itself was something, because I want to question this thing that it's a man's thing to search for perfection, because after all it was a man who picked them. I think we're confusing sometimes masculine and feminine with man and woman, and I find that similarly with the rules, as Marika said there, rules can be feminine because they are, after all, constraining. They've got different containing. Sometimes they can be. So I think to look further, I think men are also suffering from this. And that it's about the soul and its desires. The soul is seen as feminine, and this is and does the soul dare? Do we dare to listen to the desires of the soul? And sometimes even when you're talking about abuse and women that are coming out, there is also these abuses come from those desires of the soul. In this case, in men, and they're daring to do something. So I think it's quite complicated. We're talking about really shadowy things sometimes that cannot just be classified, in gender and political correctness. Yeah.
Well, I think the association between feminine and women and feminine and masculine and men, that's definitely something that I think this show is not limiting, to women, I think talking about it, and this is why I said before that I think Kalliopi was exploring the feminine, which is, I think, something very different than exploring the figure of women nowadays, or of women in general. And I think also to go back to your comments, Mike, about rules, and I would push it further and not just talk about rules, but laws.
Laws.
Practically. When we thought about this title and when we thought about this relation, I don't think either of us saw it as a contrasting, an opposition between, on one side, rule and on the other side, desire and so on. But I think our interest, and this is also why we would like to keep this as an open discussion rather than having us prepare single statements, was that I think we both were fascinated by the fact that this relation is a very fluid one, is one that we don't understand between us. We couldn't really understand what the relation between rule and desire is, between laws and desire, whether it was containing desire or whether it was desire that actually was creating the space for a specific law and the space for a specific structuring of a relation between exactly, yeah, most likely both, of course, but in which degree one can see them in one sense or the other. And I think this was particularly interesting to me when we were working when you were working on the figurines and we were having a dialogue about them.
Yes.
The fact that whenever you were talking about them being contained, you were looking at the actual structure that was containing them a lot of times. And my first reaction was they were actually contained within the bandages. It's the bandages themselves, rather than the frame that contains them. And this containing is not at all a constraint. It's a containing. It's an actual shaping of the form rather than a constricting. But I don't know. We got interrupted before, but I actually wanted to ask you a bit more about the origin and the ideas behind those.
Well, those figures, the figurines in relief downstairs, you will notice that they're never stretched out. There's not a figure that's lying like this. They're all folded, and they're kind of trying to fit in that frame. On top of that, they have the bandages around their limbs, holding them tight, like when we break an arm or a leg, and we are bandaged in order to help it heal, but at the same time keeping it immobile and keeping it in one position. So, yes, there is containment in the box, but it is a very suppressed containing. It doesn't show any distress in the figure. It just shows that it's been happening for thousands of years, fitting in these frames. And now they're becoming a little bit more relief rather than being completely flat as they are in this book, that they are completely flat. The same surface, now they become more three-dimensional and getting out of that frame and the box that they're in. So that's what I would like to say about this particular reliefs, that they are also talking about a different stage of growing out of your box and becoming yourself eventually. Up here there are other boxes that contain my face and my hands, and they also close either the ears or the eyes or the mouth or one of the senses. It is like restricting the person in the box to actually feel the world, and or being absolutely suffocated inside that box that they are, surrounded by different materials and so on. So in a way, also these pieces here speak about the same feel of restriction, needing to be out, but respecting or afraid or not daring to break this structure and do chaotic things, because in breaking, daring and breaking the structures, you create chaos, and then you have to deal with the chaos that you are given. So.
And how do you see then the relationship with the words of Sappho on that
Bandage.
material in relation to those boxes? Because in a way that the words and the material is fluid, flowing. It's not boxed or
No.
So I wondered, was it a simple contrast between the two, or is one stating something about the other, or?
Yes, I would quote another Greek phrase when it says epeapteroenda, meaning words that fly. In this particular case, the words, I made them, I wove them. So I gave them some kind of material substance and hung them there and filled the space with all these ideas. So although they have a very ethereal presence, the meaning of these words is everywhere, and it is quite...
But what are they saying about the boxes and those structures? That's what I was wondering. You know.
Yes, I know what they're saying. But I would yes.
Maybe I can add something to it.
Yes.
The boxes, each of them have a different material in them.
Yes.
Some is a very dry and aseptic material, which is a stainless steel, but others have the organic elements to them.
Bits, yeah.
And I'm trying to give the audience a little bit of a background on
Yes.
the work of an artist, and
Yes.
something that actually started off our discussion yesterday, which is one other keyword that came up in our discussion a lot about the show and about this talk, was not just desire, was not just femininity, but was also obsession. We started this discussion yesterday by talking about something which probably the fewest people will notice, but the materiality of the wrapping of the book and of the paper of the book. And this started with a question by Jim that was asking, how do you get to this particular material, and how do you go about this? And so I'm wondering, the materials that you're choosing there, and the way that you're processing your own thoughts through the selection of certain materiality, which definitely has something which goes towards an obsession for perfection. Let's say that is probably implicit in wanting to create a work.
Very, very innocently, I was explaining to Jim how I went through London in 1992, trying to find the perfect material to wrap this book. And eventually I found it, and there it is, and I was showing it to Jim, and Jim said, how obsessed are you about these things? So I hadn't realized that I'm very obsessed about trying to bring about the result that is in my psyche, in my head, and trying to manage it through collaborating with the materials, through taming materials sometimes, and trying to make them work for me in order to get this idea, the desire to have this idea in here, to have it in front of me, and it's the task, because I mean, you might say that there might be 100,000 materials that are very close to that one, but yet I couldn't, I had to go through and trying and feeling and wrapping the book and unwrapping and, going again and again until I could get this, when you lift the book and you wrap it into that particular material, you feel as if you have a person in your arms. And I wanted to have this kind of softness and warmth as if you are embracing someone in this particular book. So that material gave it to me. which wasn't given to me by another material.
And how does this relate to the coldness and the sharpness of the edges of
yes. How does that relate to that coldness?
I mean, what does it tell us about
yes.
your need to create that, basically?
Yes, well, I used a stainless steel that it is mirrored inwardly and outwardly there in these boxes. Some of them are completely stainless steel, the others are wooden and stainless steel inside. You will notice that even the back of the boxes is also mirrored. So it allows people, while they're looking at these works, to reflect their own image into those works. So the viewer becomes part of that particular box as well. So bits of the viewer get in there together with me and my hands doing whatever they are doing.
And the shape, was the square shape essential?
The square shape I found the most constricting. I chose it to be square because it kind of doesn't allow any dimension to exceed one way or another. So that's why those boxes are made of mirrors, and the hands and whatever you see there are reflected in all sides. And when you put this box on a table, it reflects the outside world as well. So it in a way it disappears, but it also invites the image of the viewer to participate in that work.
It gives me a strange sense of what an artist is about, because there's on one side there's that freedom to explore and explore and explore and try and all of those fabrics that you looked for in the book, and yet when you come to the end result, it fixes something absolutely in a way, like those squares. So you're fixed. It's like in the alchemical thing of the fixing the volatile. Do you agree to? Is that an agreement that you make with the material to say yes?
There is a point that you surrender.
Yes, exactly. That's what exactly. Yes.
There is a point that you try, and you surrender. But at the back of your soul, my soul, I feel okay. The next one would be even better. So
yes, but that brings me back to that quote I had from T.S. Eliot.
Yes.
The awful daring of a moment's surrender. The awful daring of a moment's surrender. And I'm sure the artist at the end, when they say it's done, they have to surrender then, because otherwise they keep on going and going.
Exactly.
Because we started talking about rules and laws even and so on, I would like to bring discussion a little bit back to that thought.
All right.
And I would like to take it a little bit further than we took it before and ask you that disruptive element of desire. I would like to know, I would like to discuss how this relates to an idea of authority and to an idea of power that is instant in the structures that membrane represents. Because I think also in this case, your thoughts are quite complex and quite rich in how you structure the relation between those desires that give shape to the feminine bodies or to the feminine forms in those black sculptures, but even in the portraits of yourself in the boxes, and the containment, let's say, of an authority, of power,
It is very. The question is very complex. I'll tell you, Christian, because I don't feel, when I'm working, I don't feel authority. I feel much more an openness and an opening. and allowing people to enter my thoughts and my psyche in that sense. I don't feel authority, but at the same time, I do realize that by being controlling and trying to find the exact material that is going to express this or that is much more, it is an expression of authority. And this is, this is what I'm, doing.
Yeah. No, I think I was referring to your own personal power rather than authority. Probably authority is something that we abstract directly to an institutional level, but the power of yourself as an artist that deals with this, with these constraints, and at the same time has to let those inner desires and those inner elements of
right. Yes. Desires. Yes. I think I'm challenging authority all the time. If that's
your
what,
own, your own thoughts.
Yes, I am doing that. Even in my thoughts and depicting them into the artworks, but also in the demands that I'm making to materials. I'm daring when I use salt to create this, these heads. I had to find a way to capture salt and make sculptures out of salt, which is a substance that dissolves with moisture and so on. And now I used wax downstairs, which again is a volatile material and so on. So I think that my desires break quite a few rules that are there so far as the materials are concerned, but also challenging the thoughts of people and the authorities. Also, when I was doing work about migration, challenging people to think as if they were migrants themselves, because it's very easy for us to talk about numbers, and we have a big wave of migrants coming and doing this and that. Challenging the other person to feel it's you that's holding this tiny little bag and walk on a road that you haven't walked before, that you cross the sea, that you have no roots. Think about that. I think this is challenging as well. So.
Of course.
What about I was thinking about women's bodies and how they have become part of the whole Me Too movement and so on, and that sense of women rebelling or questioning the fact that their bodies are objects of appropriation, as it were, and wonder if you, with these figures here, yourself here, your face, and the relief figures downstairs, whether you had thoughts about what light are you casting on women's bodies and their place in the world.
Yeah, I think this is also something which relates, and I was actually going to ask something very similar, but the relation between a show like this, which I feel is a very deep and open and honest exploration of your own interior feelings, and then a show or a display of works like you have now at the O2 with the object of
the tools of endearment.
With the tools of endearment, and I think they show again an opposition of ideas about this feminine, and or not of an opposition, but a complexity of this.
Yes.
Of the way that you approach this.
Yes, I am aware of the position of women in society and of the use of women's bodies in the past and even now. So the way that I'm using the form, the feminine form in my work, it is because, first of all, it's because, of course, it is the viewpoint of a woman, and mostly I use women's bodies rather than men. Very, very seldomly do I use men's bodies. It's the bodies that I know better than a masculine body. But yes, I hope that you don't feel that I'm exploiting that form in any way.
Not at all.
Okay.
Quite otherwise, I think you're making a statement about the place of a woman's body in the world, really, and challenging something with it. That's my feeling.
Right. Yes.
Historical context, having grown up with your work, I do remember you saying when I was doing art GCSE at 16, and you were using women, when you were using women's bodies, as you said, an alphabet. I remember you describing it to me that you were using them as an alphabet to express the things you wanted to feel. I remember noticing a transformation as you developed as an artist from having women's bodies contained, as in that book, and gradually, actually, they started to become a bit androgynous, a bit more I felt the masculine energy somehow coming into your work. Then they started sticking out of the page into these triangular reliefs pointing forward, and then they jumped out of the page and became three-dimensional. Somehow you became free. So, and what's interesting about this exhibition is that they've gone back, but in a different way, to their containment. So I feel that perhaps you have experienced, or one could analyze your work, not the way you would necessarily, but one could analyze your work as a product originally of that society, but becoming aware and then showing something different. So it's I'm very privileged to have lived the process of that transformation, also as a daughter. Anyway.
Thank you, Marika. Yes, I know what you mean, and the works that you have in mind, and it might seem like going back into the box in these ones, but I dare say that you never get back into the same box at all. And maybe what I'm talking about here is sharper and more, more painful, yes, and clearer restrictions and incidents. And I'm talking a little bit more, although my face and my hands are involved in these boxes. Again, I'm using my face and my hands as an alphabet for other women as well. It's not just about me. And over the years, with the other project that I did, the Tools of Endearment as well, having thought a little bit more of what women go through in order to be able to accommodate what is going on and how to deal with what life deals to them. So that big stiletto heel with the blade at the back and the bra that is made of steel, which is a total contrast of what a bra is made of. And, you know, the other works, the corsets and whatever else is made huge, as if Gulliver's wife is supposed to be wearing them. They become part of the landscape of a place rather than an intimate piece of dressing. It is to emphasize that struggle that goes on in everyday life, that a woman must be beautiful, must carry the babies, must be good professional, must be this, and at the same time can be abused and can also not talk about anything and can, all these things that have piled up over the years on women. It's a good thing to realize and speak about them and really, find ways to balance this kind of things. So, yeah.
Do you see the things you talk about? I mean, you just spoke about it a little bit, but I really see the art that you are displaying in this show and the tools of endearment as not in opposition to each other, but as in really touching two opposite poles of this that you were talking about now.
Yes.
And I think as we're sitting here rather than being at the O2, it's good considering the weather. Maybe I would like to then bring us back to the intimate aspects that you're discussing in this show, rather than the position of women in general. I think in this show you were talking about this, but through really an intimate exploration of your own.
Yes. Well, I'm really inviting everybody in the room to participate in this conversation, because it's not just about me; it's about every one of us, and our experiences and the daring that we have had to go through life, or what are these darings and these desires that suddenly, and I was talking to Christian earlier on, and there is an irrational as well element into these sudden desires that we might have, and this irrationality that has the connotation of chaos. For instance, if we suddenly fall in love with somebody who is not in our, we're not married to this other person, and we are daring to destroy, to pursue that, and destroy what we already have in life, because suddenly we want to something else in life, or when we, it's like walking towards a cliff and then flying off the cliff, and yet the soul needs this kind of.
But aren't we talking about the two sides of desire? The desire that constructs and the desire that destructs, the side that brings destruction or the side that brings new life. But it could equally bring death, couldn't it? Desire.
Yes.
Well, daring can be constructive and can be destructive, of course. And I just love your theme of this exhibition. I think no matter who we are and what we may have achieved or are trying to achieve in life, we all identify with the challenge of daring, regardless of whether we have succeeded or failed. I personally find the show very appealing because in our human nature, I think we're very fragile. And I think this show, this exhibition, very evocatively expresses, our sensitivities, our fragility of human nature. And I think I personally identify with it. I am also very much moved by the fact that the extremely beautiful verses of Sappho have only survived in fragments. With all the burning of the libraries, what we have today is only fragments. And we find incredible energy and beauty in these. And of course, we can see in your exhibition how a phrase can become a starting point for discussion or for what we do here. This exhibition somehow celebrates the fragment. It celebrates rapture. It celebrates femininity, but also masculinity, because I don't think one can really dissociate the two. So that's me really responding to the exhibition.
If I can add something just from my own perspective as curator of the exhibition. I think this idea of the fragment of the disruption was something also that is quite evident also in how the exhibition itself is structured in its three main spaces, let's say, in its three main stanzas. I would like to go to poetry almost in that sense, because we talked about the irrational, so I think it's appropriate to use a poetic language or a language that relates to poetry. And I think we had the occasion of talking about this a few times during the opening, about the fact that it is three different environments, but that do relate a lot to each other. And some person I was talking to went as far as saying that there is a narrative that develops into this, and there definitely is a narrative. There is definitely a connection between the three, between these three stanzas that Kalliopi filled quite beautifully with her work. But I do think that the fragmentation of that narrative is also important. On one sense, because it relates to that aspect of Sappho that you point towards, but also because it allows the freedom to create the connections from our own perspective. It doesn't force a connection between the three types of works and the three aspects that are shown. And I think it was something that Kalliopi was quite worried at some point, but it's, I think, very reassuring to see that she also embraced this idea of leaving the three things. Have their own life.
It was a Christian suggestion, the arrangement of what to go where exactly, and I was a little apprehensive if the show feels separated, as if there are three shows here rather than one, and yet it works because it's like looking at the same object from different viewpoints, and it has. I think that it has worked like this.
It's interesting. The fabric is evident in two of the spaces, and then it transforms completely. It's invisible almost in the third space.
In the reliefs. In
the reliefs.
Yes.
It's there, but it's hidden, and I wondered about that sense of it's very like a poem to me, where you have a theme that's stated, and I would have thought that the exhibition starts here, then goes to the reliefs, and then goes to the deities. Right. Actually, that is my feeling, that it somehow that's the ultimate goal. This strange form which is not form, whereas the fabric takes us on a journey through reflecting on something that's quite restricted, quite contained, and then breaking out of that slightly in those reliefs, and then completely open and almost eviscerated
yes.
in the final
final stage. You remind me, Jim, also the fact that I used this method of the weaving and the fabric, which is an activity from ancient times that women were supposed to be making. And here in these fabrics carry the most radical verses that women have written thousands of years ago. And then, of course, this woven fabric is wrapping tightly the figures in the reliefs.
But you must imagine those women at their looms or at their knitting or at their sewing, what goes through their minds? What goes through their minds?
Yeah.
Just like Arachne making all those pictures in her loom, you know. I mean,
yes.
Many of the women, maybe even who did those weaving, had the verses of Sappho going through their heads. They might not have said them, but
surely. And Penelope, we know that she
Yes,
was
absolutely, yes, that's
always
right.
dreaming of Odysseus
Absolutely,
to come back.
exactly.
Who knows?
Yes, yes.
Maybe she was daring things.
Absolutely.
But Homer never said to us what she might have thought all these years that Odysseus
what
was
is
away.
in a woman's mind?
Yes.
We don't know really what's in a woman's mind.
Exactly. But it is a very meditative activity, embroidery, weaving, and so on. And, you know, Alice can tell us about weaving.
I worked with Kalliopi tied up on the scarf. I worked with Kalliopi to produce the woven bands. They were woven in Italy, but I am a hand weaver. But Kalliopi was talking earlier about the struggle she has, her commitment to making something from her head happen, which definitely was something that I worked with her. She came to me and she knew exactly what she wanted. And I think we got there. So, yeah, it was very interesting working with Kalliopi to produce the woven project.
Well, thank you, Alice. You have been great, and we went through hair-raising agonies with delays and so on. But eventually, we produced lots and lots of samples, which are really amazing, to keep in the studio, of the thickness and the lightness and the color and the shades and how many threads and how many, amazing things. And all the time Alice was reassuring me, telling me, yes, don't worry, don't have a heart attack, it's going to happen, in the end. Eventually they're here, and thank God, it really opened for me another avenue, this weaving. It's really an amazing new way of working. So I can think of a lot more things. So the desire of getting something done might open through chaos as something new for you. And you see, so it's we should it there.
Yeah, it should be. I agree.
Yes, we should there. Any thoughts from the audience? Anything else?
Can you tell us about the illegibility of the text? Because I think it's interesting that the text, as we see it on the fabric, is extremely beautiful, but at the same time completely legible. Not only because of the way they are produced, but also because of the ancient Greek being foreign, occasionally also to a modern Greek. But I think that illegibility is a beautiful thing. Can you expand on that, if it interests you?
Thank you, Marakli. It is very interesting observation. I will tell you that these are modern Greek. But of course, to the British public, modern Greek or ancient Greek is the same. It's the same. And on top of that,
it's all Greek.
It's all Greek, yes. So why didn't I put English words here? We have had a debate with Christian, who was for the ancient text, and because that was the pure text received from Sappho, and it would have been woven. And we ended up in the compromise of modern Greek, because the ancient Greek, neither the Greeks would be able to read it. So we thought, okay, let's at least satisfy some of the audience, which is the contemporary Greek people, yeah.
But was the intention to satisfy us, or did you want us just to have a feel?
No, it was, in case you just pulled it, you would be able to see that what it says. This particular band over here says that Eros has fallen upon me like the north wind that bends the branches of the oak trees. How more beautiful can it be? So, because I have worked with the verses now, if I see one word on those bands, I know what the rest of the band is. And I wanted them to be a specific size, width, which is 20 centimeters wide, and whatever length the verse was, each verse. So there are some verses that are 17 meters long, there are others that are a bit shorter and so on. But I wanted them to be the specification of the bandages that a mummy is wrapped. So the ancient Egyptian mummies were wrapped in linen bandages, more or less like that. And that's why I made them this specification. They're not narrower or wider. So that's why they're made in this size. And I like the mystery of you looking at, not just you, but anybody, looking at them and maybe recognizing a word, maybe not. But it's like looking at calligraphy, the Japanese calligraphy or the Arabian calligraphy, that we admire it, but we don't know what it says. And we can imagine, we can put our own thoughts and feelings into what this might be like.
I think there is an act of concealment there. And it is deliberate, because we had thought about other ways of displaying them and so on. And I think at the end, the idea of displaying them like they are now is exactly to do what Kalliopi wanted to, what Kalliopi expressed now, and what she wanted to do with the verses, which is to give some hints, some ideas, some fragments of what the actual content of the verses are, but to leave them as arrows, as flashes of Sappho's thought, rather than displaying her thought open in the exhibition. And I think this also relates to how we worked with Sappho, which was she was definitely a presence in the development of this exhibition, but it was not an overwhelming and almost intouchable figure that was there. It was more of an aura, let's say, of her ideas, of her verses, of the feelings that she expresses, rather than going verse by verse and observing each word by itself. So it was,
Yeah. I like the thing about the illegible. I think that's really interesting for an exhibition.
Yeah.
And it raises for me the fact that we've talked about how much was seen or shown or expressed, but what is not being expressed?
That's a question.
Yes. And of course we guess, especially if you don't read the Greek, you have a hint. So that leads us to think, I wonder what she's hiding in those other places, rather than what is seen, what's not being expressed.
Yeah, and I think in that, at least me, I don't know if that's something that we all feel, but in that unalienable aspect, in that undefinable aspect of something which is expressed through art, that is actually the essence of art. No? To leave this openness to us all, to catch little glimpses, to interpret things and so on, without putting our own understanding over the one of the artist. We cannot go to an artist and say, well, this says exactly this. No, there's always an element in an artwork that is only owned by the artist itself.
Of course, but I think the artist would be very happy and satisfied if the person, the viewer, all the viewers would have their own feeling and their own recognition, because why I'm doing this work is to be able to tell the viewer, do you recognize yourself in this? This would be my satisfaction and my joy. Am I talking something that resonates in you? And that is what I'm aiming for. I'm not. This is my ultimate desire to be able to to embrace the other person by telling them, look, do we share these thoughts? Do we share these feelings, these experiences? This is what I would like to do, to achieve. So, am I succeeding?
Very much.
Right.
Are there any other thoughts, comments?
Any questions?
Also something quite specific about the works, if you do, of course. I mean, we covered quite a few aspects, but I think otherwise we can...
I'm just so impressed with all this explosion of women group. Big time now. That's all. Okay. Especially come from you, that I've known for many years.
Right.
I believe the journey you've come to now after all these years.
Oh, thank you, Winnie.
It's mind blowing.
Thank you.
Very strong.
Thank you.
Excellent.
If I can add to that, I don't know Kalliopi for many years, just for roughly a year in particular, but even within this year I've noticed in the making of this show a resistance, but also an opening to expressing very, very deep and personal feelings. It was really something that I saw building up throughout the show, so it was quite a privileged position to be in, and I'm glad to see that it is something that is also relevant to a longer journey, let's say, of Kalliopi. It was not just something that I had my own pleasure to and my own pleasure to be witness of. So yeah.
So it was a chance occasion that I met Christian Oxenius when he took over the biennial of Çanakkale, which was shut down by Mr. Erdogan, and the whole biennial moved to Germany, and Christian was the curator in Germany. So that happened over a year ago.
Because this is recorded and because it's a bit of a touchy subject, especially for my colleagues in Turkey, I have to say that, and this is because it's a fact.
Yes.
It was not shut down by the government. There was no interference directly by the government. It was a decision of the curators of the show, with which I continue to collaborate and so on. But sorry, I know that it might seem completely unnecessary, but knowing the situation in Turkey and being very close to a lot of people there, I need to be precise. I need to be precise.
We must be very precise. Yes.
We didn't take over anything. It was a collaboration which had started a year prior to that.
Yes.
And of course, we were very happy to help them in a situation in which eventually they ended up not having the show on display in Turkey. But
well, we will not go into why it didn't happen in Çanakkale. So for some magic reason, it didn't happen in Çanakkale, so it happened in Osnabrück. And this is how I met Christian, and I found that I liked the way that he brought about a very difficult task there in Osnabrück, with a lot of his personal work. So this is why I invited you to participate with, to help me bring about this show, and I thank you very much.
Well, I thank you for the very flattering words, but I'm also happy that this show went much further than that first contact. I think we developed quite a
absolutely
nice connection.
A nice connection.
Yeah.
And I would like to say something about Eugene, but
I'm still wondering. All the words of Sappho. Why is it that particular quote? And of course, the title is only half of the quote. Why is that the one that really, really meant something to you?
Very interesting question. No, psychoanalytical question to me. So, I guess we all read lots of things, and we choose something that resonates to each one of us. So this small fragment of a fragment, which is always to be there, seem to be very relevant to me now, and also I feel relevant to all women and all men at this stage, because we are undergoing a lot of pressures, a lot of challenges, and daring is it can be destructive, but it is also constructive, and it is necessary in life. Otherwise, you just remain in a kind of box and you function, you know. So I think. What are you thinking?
I said, and there are boxes.
Yes, like the yes. You just.
But when could you dare to be in a box? When would the daring be to be boxed?
To remain in the box,
to remain in the box, or to just put yourself in a box,
or to put yourself in a box, which I think you have done in one of your artworks.
Yes, I made the box, and then you
and put somebody in it.
To show that you are in a box, because the difference between this piece and the book is that it's not wrapped up like a baby. It's there. So the difference here is allowing yourself to be seen in a box.
Yes, I think that's absolutely, yes, to be seen in a box. Yes.
More protected.
Yes, absolutely, yes. To be seen in the box, absolutely.
Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't either until Jim said.
Yeah, I think
the link
that's,
between the material.
yes,
and I noticed
that's
it.
really excellent, yes.
And to talk about the box and getting into that box, we often close ourselves into boxes because we are injured by the environment and by what is happening around us. So by trying to protect ourselves from different injuries, we close, and then we feel we end up in a terrible box, like Kavafis had said. That we build walls initially to protect ourselves, and then eventually we find ourselves isolated, almost dead inside that isolation. So I would say, yes, we might dare closing and separating ourselves from injuries and from different things that we don't like happening to us during our life. But we must be careful not to be isolated and to cut ourselves off from life itself, because life is really hurtful often, but it is necessary.
That's why I think Marika has really hit it on the nail on the head. To dare to show yourself shut in a box, I think it's incredible daring. Incredible daring. Because we all want to show ourselves as being free and having autonomy, and but to say, I'm in this box, that's really quite a terrible thing, but to show it is real daring.
Because my audience said that they feel that I have people feeling similarly. I feel that I have company in the box. So in those boxes, so I'm
yes.
consoled by that.
Each in his prison thinking of the key, T.S. Eliot says. Each in his prison thinking of the key.
I mean, I think it's a moment, it's a feeling that we all experience somehow in different ways. And I think this is why it's particularly daring to then show yourself.
Yeah.
Because we don't. I don't. I've never shown myself in a box.
But you're confessing now, so.
Oh, okay.
so that's good. Yeah.
Okay, well.
So, there we are.
I think we can.
If there is not any other thought or question?
I think
We can call it an evening.
we can call it an evening.
And I would like to also thank.
Definitely thank Jim.
I'd like to thank Jim Fitzgerald daring to participate in this very unusual evening and giving us some insights and also supporting and helping me for many years.
It's been a privilege.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And maybe part of the daring that I'm doing is your fault as well. So there we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.